If you go to any radio station and talk to the on-air staff, there's a good chance you'll find a second or maybe even a third generation broadcaster. Radio is one of those careers that lends itself very well to being a family profession. You'll also find people who had a passion for broadcasting at a very young age, went to school as a media major, worked the promotions beat, and got their foot in the door to do what they've always dreamed of doing. But what about the folks who are in radio as a second or even third career? I'm one of them. Before I was here in my engineering job, I worked IT and K-12 education for 9 years. Before that, I was the tech guy at a CPA firm for a while. There are lots of folks out there who had an untraditional path to broadcasting, and I want to introduce a few of them to you.
Thankfully, I didn't have to look very far for untraditional broadcasters. Here in my own cluster of stations, there are a couple of folks with extremely interesting histories. Natalie Jones works the PM drive time day part for our adult CHR station with her co-host Freddie Mac. She says working in radio allows her to let her personality shine when most other places would tell her to tone it down.
Before I worked in radio, I did 65 different things. I had 65 different jobs. Primarily, I paid the bills by working in the service industry, but I did a lot of event planning, hosting random things. I cleaned houses. I once worked at a self-storage facility, dressed up as a pizza on the side of the road, and worked at a strip club once. I did a lot of stand-up comedy before I got into radio, and I love music. All right, I gotta be honest with you. I don't really consider any of my other jobs real jobs before I had this job. I was completely unprepared. I wouldn't say unprepared. I was really nervous the first 2 years. Every single day, before every time I talked on the mic, I was incredibly nervous. Always a ball of butterflies in my belly for 2 straight years, at least 2, yeah.
Down the hall at the country station, Ryan Jacobs keeps watch on the overnight shift. While serving in the armed forces, he was in another family business when a unique opportunity presented itself.
Before I worked in radio, I worked for the family business. We owned roller skating rinks here in the Cincinnati area. Did that, and my grandfather always told me, you need to get out of the family business. So I joined the military to get, experience in life, because I didn't know what I was going to do in life, and I was going to college for aviation. And the military was a way to help pay for that. Went reservist, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and got out of basic training, tech school, that stuff, and I was DJing and got discovered to be a radio DJ, which was the coolest thing ever. I'm still learning, and it's been almost 15 years. Always wanted to do it, but I didn't know how to go about it, and I was just an old skating rink club DJ, I knew how to mix a little bit and scratch and things like that, and get people into it, but I didn't have the talking ability that most radio DJs, and that's an art in itself, to learn that. I'm a guy that's like, hype it up, let's go, get the party going, put your hands in the air, that's what I was doing, and I came into radio, and Grover, my boss, he was like, dude, you're not at the club. You need to just talk like you're talking to me right now in a room. You don't need to hype it up and scream and holler, So that was a learning curve, and I know there's broadcasting schools and things like that, and I probably could have went that route. It's just, I was having fun in the clubs, club DJ and stuff like that, So I never did pursue it that way. And then Grover found me, and he's like, you know what? You're a diamond in the rough, and I'm gonna polish you up, and he's still been working on me for 15 years now. So yeah. Being a club DJ and a skating rink DJ, it's all about the party and the atmosphere, and you've been to a wedding and the DJ's like, we're doing the YMCA, and everybody scream and shout, and that's what I was used to. And so the biggest change for me was to actually relax, sit down, and have a conversation. That was my biggest turnaround, was I need to just speak like I'm, speaking to my friends or my wife or my kids, instead of being like, hey everybody now, just I need to chill. And that was probably one of the hardest things. And then also just, learning the business, it's different, and you got record labels and all these different people and things like that. And that's probably the hardest thing I would say for me, was the transition of being the hype guy to the, hey, I'm just Ryan hanging out, having a chill time, and we're listening to, Toby Keith right now.
I took some time to talk to JD, who is an engineer at a cluster in Virginia. Like Ryan, he also served in the armed forces and says it helped him prepare for the nature of the work in broadcasting.
So before I started working where I currently am, which I started May of last year, so I'm coming up on a year now in the radio business. I spent 22 years in the Navy. I joined when I was 18 years old, pretty much 8 days after I graduated high school. Joined the Navy and went down, spent a year getting trained up on basic electronics, how to maintain and troubleshoot radio and radar equipment. Spent pretty much a year all the way up through DCAC, basic electronic theory, all the way up to super heterodyne receivers and that kind of stuff. Spent the next 21 years essentially being on board ships and being stationed on a couple different overseas assignments. And then after that, spent the last 3 years prior to retirement doing cybersecurity warfare stuff, which was kind of neat and interesting. And honestly, it's pretty much the most IT side of things that I ever got a chance to get my hands on, which definitely helps out where I'm at now. Because being an engineer, you definitely have to mix a lot of your IT knowledge with your broadcast. One of the good things about being in the military is that you have to move. As you kind of heard with my background, every 3 to 4 years I was going to a place. And when you go to a different ship or a new command or anything, they're going to have completely different equipment or systems. Sometimes you get some schooling in between, sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's just a lot of little equipment that there's really no training on. You just got to figure it out. So I got very accustomed to kind of walking in with zero knowledge or next to no knowledge and just figuring it out. And I really enjoy that. Like really, really, really enjoy that. I was kind of terrified about retiring and finding a job that was just boring. I think that was my biggest fear. And this is not boring ever. I enjoy. Sometimes things are high stress. Sometimes, you have to deal with things on the weekends or late at night. That's not a problem with being a military background. I mean, I'm very used to being 24/7.
Ryan says his experience in the military shaped him into the kind of person who can put in the work to be successful as a broadcaster.
Because they need somebody reliable and dependable, and me being in the military, that's what you get from me. I'm loyal, I'm dependable, I'm gonna get the job done. As we always say, what's the mission? What's the task? Get it done. And that's kind of what you get when you get me. Is being that I'm military, I still am. Got 3 years left. I'm mission oriented. I know what my mission is when I walk through that door, and I get it done.
Jayce is a producer based in Florida. Like Natalie, he had a lot of stops on his path to the airwaves.
I've had several jobs before I was working in radio. Of course, I think everybody's first job was working at a fast food joint of some kind. But I was actually an ice cream man. I was driving an ice cream truck. I drove an ice cream truck for 7 years. And it's quite interesting because the whole radio aspect came into my life years before that. As when I even found out like radio stations were like a thing. I really just didn't understand what radio was as a kid, right? But it wasn't until I got this toy called a radio DJ. It was a toy from like the early 90s, and I could broadcast to like a half a mile around my house. And I'm like, I have to do this. This is so much fun. I get to entertain people. I get to say stupid things. I get to play silly music. I did a giveaway of some kind, and some kid won like a G.I. Joe from me or something. I was driving an ice cream truck before I got into radio, and even continued it for a little bit while I was doing that because the ice cream truck was a seasonal thing. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then once I got into radio, I've been doing that for the last like 5 to 7 years. Actually started, I want to say, probably in the early 2000s when I was in a summer camp. I was probably 10 or 11 years old, going to a day summer camp and coming home at night. But we ended up going to our local radio station on a tour. And the two co-hosts, I believe they're in engineering now, so they're not even probably going to hear this because I don't think they listen to anybody anymore. Their names were Steve and Dana, and they were the morning show hosts, and we went right after the morning show. There was probably a group of like 5 or 6 of us in this little condensed studio with a bunch of buttons everywhere and a bunch of equipment everywhere and this big old board in front of us and a microphone. Nobody really knew what it was, and he goes, I want you guys to count to 10. So we counted to 10. All of a sudden, he pushed some buttons, and then it sounded like we were in outer space. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where the hell is that coming from? Why do I sound like I'm a million miles away? It was so cool.
Everyone I interviewed agrees on the importance of having a mentor in the business.
When I started here at Q102, which is a whole different vehicle monster that is like real broadcasting compared to before, Jeff Thomas from the morning show here at Q102 was my mentor. He really took me under my wing and taught me some of the most solid sound advice that I still live by today.
I mean, everyone that I work with, because I didn't know about radio, so being a new guy, these guys that have been around that I listened to growing up, it was like, I'm actually sitting across from you and I can ask you a question. When I was younger, I thought that was, not achievable. And, so yeah, a lot of those guys I looked up to and mentor or as mentors and, bouncing things off of them. And they might not have known they were my mentor, but they were giving me the advice and things that I needed to succeed in this business. And, I'm still treading water. Yeah.
My wife actually works for the company. She works on the sales side and the data. She actually is the Salesforce admin for the company I'm at right now. And I was coming up on retirement, so I was trying to find some part-time work to just kind of get my foot in the door. And at that time, like I said, she was working for the general manager for my market. And one of the 2 engineers moved on, and the other one was going to be retiring in about 6 months. So had a chance to have a good conversation with him, and then talk it over with one of the regional engineers that's here. And they pretty much just took a chance on me, to be honest with you, because again, I mean, walking into this was pretty daunting. It definitely helps as well that at the same time I got hired, a veteran in the engineering side of things actually came on. So he's been a huge help the past 9 months, just making sure that at least if I have any questions, I know who to actually go to. And of course, the guy that retired, he built this place from the ground up for 30 years. So he's still a really good source of information.
So Steve and Dana were really my entry into radio and finding out that radio existed and the cool things that you can do in just a couple of seconds with a group of kids. I really think that Steve and Dana, who were working for WAFL on the morning show, were really like, hey, look at all this stuff. Look at all these cool buttons you can press. And that made it cool. There was a gentleman by the name of Gary John who did the afternoon show at WAFL for, I'm not even kidding, probably 20 years. I remember when I would visit, because they would have these, like, if you're on the honor roll, you can come say what's up on the radio station. So I would try really hard to get on a roll, not really caring that I was trying to be smart. I just wanted to go to a radio station if I had good grades. Yeah. And I remember there was a Spanish station. The production studio was off to the left, so you can actually see them talking. I'm going, who are they talking to? I don't hear them on the radio. But again, I'm still kind of getting a development into all this. And as soon as you walk in the door, I saw this guy named Gary John. And he was just like, hey, man, what's up? High five. I'm like, we can high five here? This is so cool. I was just so naive, man. It was amazing. I was dumb, and it was so much fun.
Everyone also had some wisdom to share.
That it is a 24-hour-a-day job, and you gotta love it. I love it because it keeps me, it's kind of like a reflection of who I am and what I love to do all day, and I personally love that. A lot of people, I've realized, like, sometimes they don't, or maybe they're not made for it. I would say make sure you realize that it is it's a big commitment.
It's still constantly changing. Not just the technology, but actually what the markets are utilizing is constantly changing. So if you're looking to do something like this, be adaptable with that kind of stuff.
So radio has taught me a lot and how to be personable, I think, and how to be open to discussion, because again, you're sitting there behind a mic and yeah, you might be alone, but you're not. You have a lot of people that are depending on your information. You have a lot of people that call in. I didn't realize how many people called into a radio station until I worked for one. Like, people still do this? Of course they do. And now they text, and now they email, and now they post on Facebook, and then they have requests, and then they have questions.
For anyone who might want to explore this career path but wouldn't know where or how to start, they also have some words of encouragement.
But I would say, knock on that door and ask what it takes, or go to a broadcast school, or, it's all about, send an audition tape in, with you talking and things like that, and get that feedback. Don't, you're going to stink. I still do, I think we all do. We got to learn, so you can't be afraid of the word no. Don't be afraid of the word no. You're going to have, no, you're not good enough, door slammed in your face. And the other thing is, take every opportunity that you're given. If there's an opportunity to do an overnight shift from midnight to 5 or midnight to 6 on the weekends or the weekdays, take those opportunities. Because when I was first in the business, they didn't have those opportunities. Of one time something came open, I said yes, and it opened a lot more doors for me.
You're going to hear a lot of no's. Again, don't let it discourage you. There's a small radio station in St. Augustine, Florida. I think it's WSOS or whatever it is. And I ask them probably once a month, hey, look, I dropped some new stuff. I made a couple of new commercials. Does anything I have here fit what you're looking for? No. I'm going to keep sending them, because one of these days he's going to come across the owner of another radio station that might be a little bit further away, or he might have friends of another radio station that might be in another direction that might need it. But at least I know he's looking at my emails. He may not be listening to what I'm putting out there, but I know he's reading my emails, because I keep sending back, not at this time, but thank you for reaching out. But one of these times when a spot opens up somewhere, or God forbid, there's something that happens at the station and somebody calls out and he knows, hey, this guy sounds like he knows what he's doing. We can see on his resume he looks like he knows what he's doing. We've heard some of his stuff. Let's take him in for a weekend or two and give everybody a vacation and make him work. Okay. Don't give up. Don't quit making yourself better. You might think you sound terrible on a mic. Well, you can make yourself sound better on a mic. You might think that you're saying ums and uhs and, taking unnecessary pauses. You can fix that. You can always make that better. Never stop learning, never stop trying to learn, never stop trying to make yourself better. If I had never opened up Periscope and live streamed myself, I wouldn't have been found by my buddy Eric, who was running iRadio USA. He'd have never found me. He'd have never even seen me, and I wouldn't have been doing voiceovers, and I wouldn't have been doing production and commercial stuff for the last 5 years. I wanted to learn. I wanted to get better, and yeah, I didn't want to get up at dark 30, but when that chance was there, I took it.
Anything's attainable. I mean, to be honest, this comes a lot from also my wife. When we first moved here to Virginia 6 years ago, the first job she got was with the Girl Scouts, working in the volunteer department. So, I mean, going from that all the way to Salesforce admin, there's a lot in there. But what really it came down to was your ability to be teachable, your ability to learn. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to put yourself in a position that you're not comfortable in to be able to learn? Then this is not going to be a problem at all, because there's a lot to learn. And once you start getting more and more into it, it's there. There's a lot of people here in this community that, I mean, me and you, we don't work for the same company, but we're still having this conversation. I'm in the SBE organization locally. A lot of veteran engineers are available, and if I ever have any questions, it's a small community, but everybody's here. My predecessor who left this job to become a chief engineer at another job. We've had conversations. It's a very small community, but very tight knit, and everybody's perfectly fine with helping out or giving information. It's been really good.
It is attainable. Do it, no matter what. If there's a voice inside of your mind telling you not to do it, or that you're not good enough, or any doubt at all, don't listen to it. Do it. You will never know unless you try. So try your best. Try your hardest. You'll never know. You got one life. Might as well give it a shot.
I want to thank Ryan, Natalie, JD, and Jayce for their time and their wisdom to make this video happen. There are many others out there who are just like us, so don't think you can't become a broadcaster just because you didn't go to school for it. My goal when making these videos has always been to pull back the curtain a little, share the cool stuff we do, and maybe inspire some people to have a go at a broadcasting career. If that's you, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss anything from me. I'll see you next time.